Erikka and I had to break this episode up into 2 episodes. Right now, you are watching episode 1. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Realness Required Podcast. My name is Waldie.
And I'm Erikka.
What are we talking about today, Erikka?
We're talking about spirituality, religion, maybe how God showed up for us in our lives over the years.
Okay.
Then we're going to tap into that a little bit.
Okay. Big subject.
Yeah.
Where do we start? Well, if we start at the beginning, I don't have much experience with religion. I didn't grow up in a household or with parents that brought us up in that way or pushed that on us, religion on us. My parents are from Gen X, so I think Gen X might have been a little bit different than the baby boomer generation, where I think it was kind of, Gen X was raising kids a little bit differently, I think, than their parents did. So yeah, religion really wasn't a main cornerstone in our
But there was a
household.
belief in God.
There was a belief in God, but like my mom would wear a cross, but we wouldn't ever go to church or anything, even on holidays, Christmas, Easter. Really, it was my mom wore a cross, so she believed in God, and that was like the extent of my experience with religion, really, or Christianity. She would wear a cross. She believed in God. I didn't know any scripture. I didn't know. Maybe I knew like the story of Noah or Adam and Eve.
Like seeing
to some
something
extent.
on TV or
Right,
something.
right. Like that was the extent of what I had been exposed to as far as religion is concerned.
Okay.
Or Christianity too, yeah.
Okay. Well, for me, it was a little different. I grew up not really knowing about religion either, not from my mom anyway. My mom, she worked 2 jobs. So she worked Saturday night, so she slept Sunday. We didn't really go to church. If anything that I remember from going to church was special occasion only. And I can really remember Easter especially because she would go out and buy the dress, buy bows for our hair, buy the shoes, buy the socks to go with the shoes.
White socks?
Yes,
with white
white
shoes?
socks with the lace around it.
Yes, with white shoes, white socks.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And so she would go all out and do that just for us to go to church on that one day, Easter. We would never wear the dress again. By the time the next year rolled around, the socks, because by the time the next year rolled around, we grew out of it. So she would have to do the whole thing all over again. And I don't know what it was. She never did speak on it. I don't know what it was about her that she felt like, maybe she felt like she needed to get something in because I haven't went all year. I got to get a little bit of something in here.
Right.
I don't know, or if it was just symbolic because it was Easter and what that represented. Maybe she felt like I need to at least try to go on that Sunday. I'm not sure, but that was the only thing that I remember as far as going to church with my mom. Now, for the summers, we used to spend every summer with my aunt on my dad's side.
Around what age did you start going
I would
to
say
your
as
house?
early as maybe between like 8 and 9, somewhere around in there. Okay. And I would spend every summer with my aunt, and she would make us go to church. And we went to a Baptist church, and she would make us go to church every Wednesday for Bible study and every Sunday. And she even made us join the choir. So I had to join the choir like against my will. So when
I think Baptist church, I certainly think of, there's going to be some singing.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's gonna be singing,
so
it's gonna be
sing.
praising, it's gonna be dancing, it's gonna be worshiping. She made us go to church, and she made us join the choir. And so I just remember being in church several days a week. And that was how it was if I was going to spend summers with her at her house.
Now you mentioned that was an aunt on your dad's side.
Yes.
Was that side of your family more religious than your mom's family?
Absolutely. I don't even know that religion was part of my mom's upbringing. I don't ever remember doing anything religious or anything that has to do with the church or God, period, with my mom's side of the family. But my dad's side of the family, it was a lot of kids. I think it was 7 of them total. And so their mom always prayed and, worshiped God. And, I can remember my aunt told me that they would catch the bus, like ride the bus with their mom, and the city bus, and she would be singing or praying on the bus. And my aunt just remember being embarrassed by that, because they were young and people looking at you and stuff like, what's wrong with this? But she was always constantly praising God or praying or worshiping or thanking God for something. That's just who she was. So she very much so brought them up in the church, believing in God, believing in prayer, that whole thing. So I'm pretty sure that's where my aunt got that from, and she just continued to go to church. And mostly all of my cousins on my dad's side, they pretty much go to church regularly or have been to church at least in their young years. As they get older and become adults, everybody has their different thing, but I'm pretty sure they were brought up in the church.
Now, you're 8 or 9. You being 8 or 9 years old, how did you feel about attending church? At that age, what is it like for you?
I don't remember having any feeling towards it. It just seemed like something to do.
Or that's what you're supposed to do.
Yes, that's just what you're supposed to do.
We're listening to my aunt.
Yes, but I don't think I ever had any connection with God or anything like that. He didn't speak to me. Not that I know of. Not that I remember, and I believe I would remember something like that. I really didn't have that connection with God then. However, they usually say train a child up in which the way they should go, and then it will just continue in their life. Since I was brought up in the church, even though I didn't go consistently, I'm gonna eventually go back to that, and I did. So when I was 19, that's when I decided to get saved and join a church. And
what was going on in your life that you made that decision? Was there a gap in time where you stopped? You mentioned that when you were much younger, being brought up in that environment, certainly with the influence of your aunt, has had that ingrained in you, so that even, as you said, even if you kind of depart from that routine, you'll find your way back.
Yes.
So what was that time in between where you kind of didn't have church or God or that?
Well, it had to be like late middle school, maybe. Definitely high school, I wasn't going to church. I mean, because I wasn't spending summers with my aunt anymore.
Because you're getting older, you got friends, you're trying to play outside, you're trying to hang out,
if I'm spending a night with somebody or hanging out, it's going to be like my friends. It's not, I'm not going to need to go to my aunt's house for the summer. My mom don't need anyone to watch me or anything like that. I can pretty much watch myself. And to be maybe around 13 or 14, on up until 19 when I decided to go back to church. And it was only because I really wasn't on the path in which I knew I should be on. I was really going more so down the destructive path. And I knew that wasn't me, that wasn't my upbringing, that wasn't a good reflection on my mom or my family. And so it was like I was longing for something. Something was missing from my life. And
would you say that intuition told you to
it was
go
to church?
Yeah, to
just go to church.
Yeah.
And I prayed about it because I still knew about prayer, and I still prayed. I still prayed every night, but I didn't have that connection. You can pray and not have a connection with God, not hear from God. But I prayed that I find a church that I connect with. And I think I visited maybe 2 or 3 churches, and then I found one, and I really enjoyed the service, and I really enjoyed the pastor, and so I went back. And so I just kept going every Sunday for about a month or 2, I would say. And then the pastor, he does an altar call, and an altar call is when they ask, does anyone want to give their life over to Christ, and they want to accept God in their life. And whoever wants to do that, they go up to the front of the church, and they get prayed for. They, say that they want God in their life, and they accept, God and Jesus Christ as his son. And so one Sunday, my intuition was like, you should go get saved. And I didn't do it. And so I went back the following Sunday, because they do an altar call every week. It's going to be every Sunday. And so when they did altar call that time, it was a feeling that I had. It was like a burning sensation in my body. And it was like a pulling. Like, as the pastor was saying, if anyone wants to get saved, please come up here now. We welcome anybody, and the music starts playing. Mm-hmm. And I got my eyes closed, and I'm like, I know I should go up there, but it was like something was holding me back. It was like the enemy trying to pull me one way and God trying to pull me another way. It was literally like spiritual warfare going on in my body. I could actually feel it. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that was something. And so I'm like, it's something trying to stop me from getting saved. So I'm about to get saved. And so okay. I'm still not walking though. I'm still standing still. So the confirmation though was the pastor said, there's still someone out there that's afraid to come up.
And he doesn't say that all the time.
No. And was like, so I'm going to wait a little bit longer. If there's anyone that needs to come up here, I'm like, he's talking to me. So I go up there, and that's when I just decide to give my life to Christ. And after that, I pretty much stopped hanging out with the friends that I was hanging out with, because we were all just into all kind of stuff. We weren't doing the right thing at all. And so I had to stop hanging around with those friends. And I stopped smoking, because I would only do it at parties and things like that, only to fit in or, because everyone else was doing it. But I stopped that. I stopped drinking. And of course that's underage, because I'm not even 21 yet. So obviously I'm drinking underage. So stopped doing that, stopped cursing. I did the whole thing. And I said, I'm going to do this by the book, by the Bible. I'm try to do it the right way. And after I did that, I decided to get baptized, because that goes along with getting saved. You're supposed to get saved, and then you're supposed to get baptized. And when you get baptized, they totally submerge you in water. They put you underwater. And then they say a prayer, and then they say they baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the congregation, which is the church, they witness it, because there's supposed to be witnesses, and so that is the whole baptism thing.
And I don't know anything. I really am not. I don't have much experience. Like I said, I don't have much experience with the whole process. But my assumption is, just as you're explaining it, in the fact that water is involved, mm-hmm. and I know some religions or some, I don't know, groups of Christianity, I don't know what you call it, different mm-hmm. divisions of Christianity.
It's denominations.
Mm-hmm. Wear white in the bath?
Yes, correct. Okay. You're in all white.
So to me, that just water being involved, white being involved, that sounds like a purification.
Or cleansing.
A cleansing,
yes, correct.
Sort of ritual or process.
Yes, and so that usually goes along with it. So anyone that got saved, within the month, they have one day where they say, okay, anyone that wants to get baptized, you come on this day, we're going to do it at this time, and the congregation is going to witness. And so I decided to do that as well. And so that pretty much led my journey with God, with religion, with spirituality, with that whole thing.
You mentioned when you were younger, you didn't have that connection.
No.
And you were attending church, didn't have the connection with God, you're just doing what you're told to do. At what point do you start feeling that connection with God?
When you accept him into your life. You have to, because God doesn't force anything on you. You have to willingly accept him. You have to willingly want a relationship with him. And once you ask him for a relationship, you get it.
What was the moment for you?
That was when I got saved. When I got saved, that is me accepting him in my life.
But
that
you
is
fe-
me
you actually
saying,
felt his presence, or you felt
shortly after
that
that
connection?
Shortly after that is when I started to actually know he was there, and start to feel that connection, and even start to hear from him. I didn't hear from him prior to that. And so I know that that was the point in time in which I started to have a connection with him once I got saved. It may not have been immediate. I may have had a connection but didn't necessarily hear from him or feel it right away, but very shortly after I did.
I mean, certainly the experience of being pulled, or that spiritual tug one direction or another direction, I think is a communication from God.
Yeah.
Or like, hey,
I mean,
Erikka, get over here.
Yeah, you can say that. You can
It
say
could
that.
be.
Yeah.
Because it was enough for you to
Oh yeah,
go
it was
up
enough
there.
for me to go up there. Because
Yeah.
I'm like, if it's this much of a struggle, like a pull trying to hold me back, you must be holding me back from something great. Let me push through this.
And you did say that you have to make the choice. You were already in the church.
You have to make the choice.
So like that is kind of
But the church
opening
isn't
up.
the choice.
No. The
Yeah.
church isn't the choice. But if it was God kind of being like, hey, like come up here,
Yeah.
you were already open. Like
Correct,
spiritually,
yeah.
you were already like there already. Do you know what I'm saying?
Because I walked into the building. I mean,
Right.
I'm obviously looking for that connection.
Right.
And but it didn't come for me until that moment in time.
Okay.
And then after that, I would start to hear from him. And I remember the first time I heard from him clearly, because when he speaks to me, it's like matter of fact. And he'll say only a few words. It could be one word, it can be 3 words, it can be 5 words. But it's not like a full sentence. We're not having a full-blown he's not having a conversation with me. It's a matter-of-fact statement. And when he says it, I know exactly what it means or what I need to do. And an example from very early on that happened in the church, an example was, remember I got rid of all my friends. I didn't hang out with anybody anymore. And so it was this girl in church, and she was one of the ones that did the announcements every morning before the pastor would come up. And one Sunday, God said, get to know her. So that was 4 words? That's it. But I knew it was him. And because there's always like a feeling that comes along with that says so where I know I have to do something. And so I was like, okay. And I didn't say anything that Sunday. It might have been maybe a couple Sundays later, because I was trying to wait until we were in close proximity. Like I didn't want to seek her out. Like I wanted to wait until we were like in close proximity, and then I could just
felt more
go.
organic.
Yeah, well, I
Sure.
could just go up and say something. And I did, and just introduced myself, and she knew I was new at the church and was like a new Christian, because she saw me when I got saved and everything, and we exchanged phone numbers and stuff, and she's one of my best friends. We've been friends since I was 19 years old. And we visit each other often. We talk on the phone regularly. She was a huge part of my life when I was married, when I had Tian. We were pregnant at the same time. So she was the directress at my wedding. So she did that whole thing for me. She was really involved in my life. And I needed her, because she was further along in her journey than I was. And so when I needed help with things, or if I needed to understand things, I could ask her. We went on trips together with the church. So she was and is a really good friend. Yeah. So I feel like she helped me along my Christian journey, especially early years. She helped me along. Yeah.
And all of that happened around the time that you were about 19, 20?
Yeah, 19, 20. And then a little later, I started to realize that coming along with church is a lot of man-made rules, and it doesn't necessarily line up with the Bible itself. I'm one of those people that read the Bible for myself. I didn't just take what the pastor said at face value. My pastor always said, after I preach, he has the scriptures on the screen, but he always said, go home and read it for yourself. Study the Bible. And so I wouldn't just take what he preached about and say, oh, that's what I need to do. I would take those scriptures that he read, I would go home, I would read them and get an understanding for myself what that meant. And so because I did that, when I would see little things or hear little things in the church, I knew that it didn't line up with the Bible and what Jesus would do.
Sure.
And
do you have an example?
Yes, I have an example. One of the girls that I was hanging out with before I got saved, she would call me every now and again to see how I was doing. We weren't close, but we kept in touch. And she wanted to come to church with me one Sunday. And I invited her. And when she came, very shortly after she got there, one of the elders, which is one of the older people in the church, kind of tapped her on her shoulder and told her that her dress was too short and that she was not at the club. And that rubbed her the wrong way. And needless to say, she didn't come back. But because that happened to her, think of all the other people that avoid church or think that God is associated with something like that because they think they're going to get judged. Right. And so they just stay away. And so just seeing things like that or the condemnation that they would bring down on other people or shame or all of that, I just knew that that wasn't the teachings of God. Mm-hmm. And after about, I would say maybe 3 or 4 years, I said that I don't want to be associated with the denomination anymore. I wasn't ready to leave the church, but I said it'll be better if I'm not associated with a denomination like Baptist or Pentecostal or whatever.
And the reason for that is because
of the man-made rules. Because there's rules that come along with every denomination. With each one. And so I said, I'm just going to go to a non-denominational church. And the reason why it took me so long, because I was really feeling like that at year 2 maybe, but I really loved the pastor. He was a really good pastor and he was really patient. He taught Bible study really well. But you can only do so much as a pastor because the congregation, the church, hires you. And if you don't fall in line with what the church think you should be doing or what you should be preaching or how you should run service or whatever, they can just vote you out. And then they can just bring in another pastor. So I understand him wanting to keep his job because some services he would really try to step outside of the Baptist realm and
start to bring in more of that non-denominational, more pure.
Correct. He
message.
Would. But he would get a little resistance from the older members, and we had a lot of them. And so I think that's what really hindered him. But, you're trying to keep your job, and it just is what it is. So I knew it was time for me to move on. I had outgrown that situation, so I moved on to a non-denominational church. And this was right after I had my daughter. I was either pregnant with her or I had just had her, because I remember taking her with me when I joined a non-denominational church. And it was a lot better because they really focused on the teachings of the Bible, period. Not anything else.
Do you believe that as time goes along, more people are like you in that they're stepping away from the denominational environment?
Well, I feel like as you grow, if you're really growing, then you should start to have those thoughts. You should start to wonder if there's more. You should start to realize that you're being, it's like a hindrance if you're in that situation. But that's only if you're growing. Some people go to church just to say they went, they listen to the preacher, and they never open a Bible. Their Bible is either on an app on their phone that they never open up, or their Bible is in their car and they only bring it out when they go into church on Sunday. I mean, I've seen it. And so if that is your extent of getting to know God or your relationship with God, then you're not growing. Right. You haven't read not one self-help book. You haven't read not one spiritual book. You don't go to Bible study.
Right. Are you there to maintain friendships or have friendships or have some sort of community or gossip or
just to say you went? Some people feel like if they went to church, that's good enough. Just because I stepped in the building.
That makes me think, that mentality makes me think, if I checked the box, I won't go to hell. If I just show up, I won't go to hell.
Yes.
That's literally, I think, 50% of people are doing that?
Probably more. But because I went to Bible study regularly, and in Bible study, you literally study the Bible. You talk about the Bible, you talk about verses, you talk about what they mean. So I regularly went to Bible study. I regularly read for myself. I was very curious.
And they have so many different, I'm sure it's like this with most religious texts, but they have versions where there's an explainer like in the margin, right?
Yeah,
like,
they have a have a King James version, they have a NIV version, and you can get a Bible that has the explanations of each verse. Mm-hmm. And it also has, it'll let you know who wrote that book. Like if it's the book of Genesis, let you know who wrote it, let you know the time frame, if it was BC before Christ or AD after death. It lets you know all of that stuff. It gives you the background of where they were, if it was Jerusalem, if it was any of those places. You can get one of those Bibles that kind of explains everything. They have pictures in the back. They let you know the whole thing if that's what you need to know. It's kind of expensive, but they have those Bibles out there. And once I got to the non-denominational church, it was a lot better for me. I felt like I was growing. Eventually, though, I realized that I didn't have to go to church to have a connection with God. And I think a lot of people tie God and church together. And so that's what makes them stay away, because they think they can only know God if they go to church. And that's just not true. And I found that out. Just as, like I said, just growing and just understanding the Bible more, I don't have to be connected to a church at all to have a relationship with God.
When I think of the small amount of scripture that I know, not verbatim, but that I have some sort of understanding of, these folks that are talked about in the Bible, they speak directly to God. They're not going to church in the Bible.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I've ever heard a scripture talking about going to church. It's always everybody's talking directly to God.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
That's true. That's true. However, I still thought that to have that connection to God, I needed to be tied to a church. I thought that. Mm. And if I thought that, then it's other people out there that think that. Because it didn't just come from nowhere. Right. But now I know that I don't. Now, I don't physically go to a church. I still watch church service sometimes on YouTube, but that's only to get a perspective. I want to hear from a particular pastor. They're giving me a message. They're reading scripture, and then they're delivering what that scripture means. Mm-hmm. So that may give me different insight on, if I read it, I may be thinking that it's something else. That's really the only reason why I do that. But that's the reason why I read spiritual books or,
And that's why there's nothing under the sun that hasn't already been said. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't go out and say it from your point of view, right? Yeah. That's why we have authors writing books about the same subject in just different ways. And that person speaks to you, and a different person might speak to me. Occasionally we might have someone that speaks to us both, but that's why there are so many people carrying forth the same message differently. It's so that it reaches who it needs to reach.
And with me saying that, it's hard for me to grasp someone not having a relationship with God, because I just don't know where I would be if I didn't have one. And I just don't understand how people go through life and not have a relationship. And once they know that it's available to them and they can have it, how much greater that their life will be.
What do you think what would, I mean, just in your eyes, what do you think would cause a lack of faith or keep someone from having faith at all? And can you really have zero faith? Because if you believe in science, you have faith in science. And like, so you do have faith, but like, what about the stuff that cannot be explained with?
I just believe it's something that turned a person away from God. Either they were judged, or like I said, they don't do church. And so they feel like, oh, I don't believe in God because I'm not going to do church because I know how those church people are, so they're tying it with church, or they've had a negative experience. Something happened to them, negative or bad. And so that makes them think that there isn't a God, because how can that happen if there is one? That type of thing.
So it's really, people skew the message, like you were saying, the folks at the Baptist church that you went to, all that judgment is going to keep people from receiving the message because they're thinking it's about being appropriate or following the rules. They're not realizing that that's not what it's about.
And they're taking pieces of the Bible, not the whole story, just pieces from the Bible.
Who are taking
church
folks.
Church folks.
Right.
So they're taking pieces from the Bible.
Right.
Not the full story, not Old Testament versus New Testament. They're just taking pieces of the Bible.
When I think about religion, or I think about growing up really in any religion, but specifically as a young person, knowing that I was a queer person, gay person, knowing that something felt different about me, I knew that that was not a space where I felt safe to be myself. Even if I didn't know who I was yet, I did know that space, I felt that space would judge me. And because, I mean, in the 90s growing up, it still was very that. It was, being gay is wrong. And there wasn't as much representation on television of gay people. So the idea of going to church felt like I would come up in there and be judged for sure. Not that we had really had occurrences or opportunities for us to go to church, because like I said, we didn't grow up that way. But when I thought about Christianity or religion, that was my association with religion, is they think something's wrong with me. They think I'm bad or wrong or sinful or whatever. And so I kind of just compartmentalize that, or kind of just, that's what religion is. I don't subscribe to that. Yeah. But I didn't necessarily say I don't believe in anything. Like, even as a young person, I think I still felt like there was something more going on, but I didn't spend too much time thinking about it. But I'm sure as a young person, I would probably pray and not realize it. Like, because I think even when you're a kid, I feel like you talk, like, in your own mind or out loud sometimes, like,
or you know if something bad is happening, you're asking for help.
Yeah.
You're asking someone for help.
Sure.
Yeah.
So maybe I did that. So I believed in a higher power. I think I've always believed in a higher power. I just didn't allow religion to tell me what that was. So I think it's like I knew what you ended up finding out for yourself. Like, I knew when I was young that something's wrong here.
Yeah. But when you're raised in that, you really you don't know. You have to have the experiences. You just have to go through that. I had to hang around all types of people to know that this particular person isn't bad just because church tell me they are, or this person that believes in this isn't bad. They're still a good person. They just believe in something different than I believe in. Mm-hmm. But I had to make that determination myself. And I had to make sure that what someone else says will not affect the relationship that I have with God. Mm-hmm. You can't let that affect the relationship that you have with him. No. And there's just been so many instances where he's shown up for me. And because of that, I'm always going to be in connection with him. There's just no way around that. I'm going to always be in connection with him. I remember I had a near-death experience, and it was very early. I was married. And I had only been married maybe a year. So I was, 22, maybe? 21, 22, somewhere in there. And my ex-husband, he was driving. It was like a road rage situation where he was kind of up on someone's bumper a little bit. And, it wasn't like a violent, but the person, I guess, saw him. And they just slammed on their brakes. And he lost control of the car. And we were on a ramp getting onto the highway. When he swerved out of control, we're literally in the middle of the highway. And the car stops and a tractor trailer truck is coming our way. Mm-hmm. And you know how hard it is for a tractor trailer to stop.
Yes.
And so we're both looking like at this car coming towards us. And I'm thinking that I'm about to die. And so I screamed like Jesus in my head, like as loud as I could. I was just like, Jesus. And the car moved back. And we rolled into like over off on the median or whatever. We just kind of rolled off there. And the guy driving the tractor trailer truck, he was like, after he finally stopped, he was like so like shooken. He like jumped out of his cab and ran across the highway and like was checking on us, making sure we were okay. And I'm like, no, we're fine or whatever. Cause he really thought he was going to hit us. And so once that whole thing was over, we got to talking about it and stuff. And I asked him, cause he was driving. I asked him, I said, what took you so long to back up? We were about to get hit. And he said, I didn't back up. He said, I didn't touch the shift. Yeah, uh-huh. I didn't touch it. He said the car just rolled back. Mm. And I knew what that was. Mm-hmm. I didn't second guess it. I wasn't like, oh, wow, really? Like, right. It was just not a shock to me. I already knew what happened. I already knew who it was. And that has kind of been my relationship the whole time. I know when it's God, when he speaks to me. I know when it's him. I always get something to back it up. One other example that I can give you, I was in Dollar General. I pulled up in the parking lot, parked beside of a car that had a bunch of stuff in it. And I'm like, oh, that's a hoarder. I was like, oh, that is a hoarder. That is awful how they got this car looking. And I went on into Dollar General and a woman crossed me in Dollar General. And when she crossed me, God said, pay for her food. And I'm going on about my business because I'm like, she probably gonna check out before me. Like, because she already had stuff in her cart. And I'm like, she probably gonna check out before me or whatever. I'm just gonna go about my shopping. And if I run into her, I run into her. If I don't, then maybe that wasn't God. And so I'm going on about my business. And I was in there for a minute. I go up to the counter. No one else is in line but me and this lady. She is before me. Like, okay. Mm-hmm. So then he already told me what to do. So then the cashier rings up her stuff. She pulls out her debit card and it declines. So I'm like, hold on, I know what you want me to do. I'm so sorry. I should have just did it to begin with so that the lady wouldn't have had to be embarrassed. Mm-hmm. I should have just did it. I should have said, God told me to pay for your groceries today. I got this. Mm-hmm. But I didn't do that. Mm-hmm. So, but God will show you. He'll be like, I told you to do this.
Yes.
So her card declined. So I was like, ma'am, I got this. Don't worry about it. She was like, oh, thank you so much. Are you sure? I said, no, I got it. Don't worry about it. And the cashier took, put her stuff in bags. She left. And the cashier was like, oh my gosh, that was so sweet and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. And then I paid for it, got out to my car. Guess who was sitting in that car with all that stuff in it? That woman. Mm-hmm. She was probably homeless. Mm-hmm. And all of her stuff was in that car. Mm-hmm.
Or who knows?
Or she was living out of a hotel.
Who knows? Maybe she got out of that situation.
Yeah.
Maybe she left someone who abused her
or
something.
It had to be a situation where she had to get out.
Yeah.
Quickly, whatever it was. Because that was all her stuff in that car. That was probably her life belonged. That was probably everything. Mm-hmm. And so just things like that. And so I had to learn, because I was young. So I had to learn over time when I hear him to just do. Don't question it. Don't say, oh, well, if I see this person again, or if I run into this person again, then I'll do it. Do it then.
Yeah.
Because he's telling you for a reason. He knew the lady didn't have any money.
Yeah.
He knew she couldn't pay for her food. And he probably promised her, go in this store, buy what you need to buy. I got you. Mm-hmm. And then he's telling me I need to pay for this woman's groceries. And I did.
You told the woman that God told you to?
I didn't.
You didn't?
I said, ma'am.
You don't need to.
Yeah. I just said, ma'am. Because he may have already spoken to her and said, just go in there and get your stuff. I got it. Mm-hmm. She probably didn't know how. She probably went up to the counter and said, Lord, now you said you got my groceries. You said it. And now I got to use this card. I don't have no money in this account. Mm-hmm. But it just happened where I ended up being there. And then she's the one that's in front of me. And it just happened that way where her card declined. And I'm like, okay, God, I get it now. I know you want me to pay for this woman's groceries. And so that type of stuff just kind of happened here and there throughout my life, where I knew it was him speaking to me. I knew it was him.
If you have a situation you're going through, you want us to discuss it, or you want our feedback on it, our point of view, we'd like to try to do some sort of segment. If you feel led or feel compelled, go ahead and email us at advice@realnessrequired.com. If you could like, subscribe, share, comment, do all the things, it would really help our podcast grow, help our viewership grow, and we hope, and our intention for the podcast, to awaken the curiosity that creates an authentic and harmonious existence, gets out there in the world, and you could help us do that. So if you could, it would be so awesome.